Hello, 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 everyone. Just want to let you know we are going to get started in a couple minutes. We still have about 10 more minutes. However, if you want to purchase your book, please do come so to the front. If you have the one book, one ticket option, please come get your book before the start of the program, and we'll start in a couple minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We're about ready to get started. There's going to be lots of conversations around this book. And if you haven't purchased it now, you can purchase it afterwards. Madison here can help you with that. We are honored to have one of the authors here, Pam Bailey. Many of you know her. But this is great, really, to have this kind of gathering always. I was telling Medea earlier, I woke up depressed this morning. I know we all have those moments when we wake up feeling very much down because of the news that's going on. And I feel like my endorphins need recharging. And this is the place that I like to come to sometimes with groups like all of you here to get that recharge. And I think all of us need it at some point or another because everyone is doing such great work out there. Every single one of you, I now have seen you in many different places, always fighting the good fight. I see Hazami's here. I see, always out there. I see Medea here. I see others that are working so hard to keep this movement going. And all of us are doing our part to keep it going as well. So thank you all for being part of this nonstop, ongoing movement that's going to go way beyond what we're working right now in Gaza and much further. And I know living in DC, it's really hard because we have a mayor that has absolutely no sense of what needs to happen in this totalitarian takeover that is happening right now in front of us. Her idea of treating someone like a Trump is by appeasement, capitulation, and she talks about, this, and the Washington Post, of course, her fans are surrounding her. You have the Washington Post that keeps praising her. You have her corporate, elite and her inner circle keep praising her and telling her that, thanking her for her measured response. And I'm always thinking, like, what measured response? The only measured response I've seen is when Trump says jump, she says how high. And that's really been an ongoing thing that's been happening with this particular mayor. It has not been a very good thing for the people of DC. She's basically abdicated her responsibility to lead and just thrown people under the bus, thinking that it's okay to have people being abducted. We have people abducted right down the street here, about 2 blocks away. They had one night here, they set up a whole thing there, like a sting operation of some sort, and they stopped people and they were taking people out of cars and snatching them. And they were stopping them, quote unquote, randomly. It wasn't because they've checked their license plate, they know it's a quote unquote, a criminal in there. It's just a random stop. And when they see a brown person in there, they immediately are going to go further. And if anyone else in that car has any kind of, status that they think is not right or whatever, they're going to be taken away. And then the law can take care of it, whatever the law is, can take care of it. And that could take months, weeks, years, and it ruins people's lives. Every single day, people's lives are getting ruined. And that's just not okay. I think, like, you look at the mayor of Chicago, you look at the mayor of Baltimore, you look at the mayor of Boston, and you see what leadership looks like. Now, a lot of people think, well, this is DC, and it's a different set of standards. But what he's going to do, he's going to do. It's not because she's going to be nice to him that he's going to change his mind or do it differently. So I think we have to understand that the problem we have in this city is we don't have the excitement of the residents of the city to stand behind this mayor because they don't trust her. They don't trust what she says. They don't trust what she does. She's very self-centered. And unfortunately, people know that, and therefore they're not going to come and rally around her when things happen, when shit goes down. So it's really a sad situation, I think, that we find ourselves in. But then we see hopeful things. We see incredible hopeful things. We see the flotilla. How many countries? 44 countries are represented. Today, an international organization called Emergency has volunteered their ship to go there in support of the flotilla. Emergency is a huge organization. It's an international organization, very highly respected. For it to be able to put themselves forward like that with their ship to go out there is a game changer in many ways. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen. Now, Israel has already decided that they're going to hold back on annexation of the West Bank, but continue to build the settlement. So that's it. And I was really interested to see that the Emiratis have said, if Israel annexes the West Bank, they've crossed the red line. I'm thinking, like, what red line have they not crossed? And what are you talking about? Like, every day you say it's crossed the red line. It's like, this little kid that goes, if you do one more time, I'm going to punch you. And then, then they walk away. It's like everybody knows that this is just hot air and it's not going to go anywhere. And we've crossed every single red line I could have ever imagined to see in my lifetime, that's for sure. And it's disgusting. It's really disgusting what's happening to this country, to the place that I call home. The fact that many of us are thinking of like getting out of here is just a terrible thing. I just can't understand how this can continue. And now they're blowing up ships in the Caribbean because of suspected drug cartels or whatever the fuck they call it. But anyway, it's just like it's like a lawless, crazy, insane world we live in. So we come here to regain our sanity. We come here to listen to stories, listen to people that we trust, that we believe. And what we don't want to do is be able to become them. That is, I think, the real energy here that we have to maintain, is because it's very easy to just kind of slip away and become them. And that's what they're hoping to happen. And we're not going to let that happen. And stories are really, really important to get that idea across, that these are stories of real human beings, and we are not numbers. I had a chance to spend some time with Pam talking about the book and how it came about and all that. We'll hear some of that discussion. I had a chance to read many of the stories in there. And there's a common thread in all of them. They're in some ways depressing, but in some ways amazingly hopeful. So it really goes to show you the resilience and the perseverance that human beings have, and how they can continue to thrive, continue to somehow find joy in the most horrific situations, to look up at the sky and see the stars and connect with those stars in a way that they had never connected before, because that's the only space they have to lie down in, is outside. Is really, those are the tiny stories that I certainly cut from. And then there is, of course, the bold letters at the end of what's happening to the people that have written those stories. Because what happened to those people that have written those stories, sometimes it's horrific. Many of them have lost their lives. Many of them have been killed and murdered by Israel and the IDF. And many of them have been displaced numerous times, 10 times, 12 times. I mean, when we think of homes, and I'm sorry to keep going here, but when we think of homes, we think, oh, somebody's home got destroyed, but at least they're alive. You know what it's like to lose your home? The place that is that safe space that you can go back to, that has memories, that has your dreams, that has your hopes, that has your bed, that has a dish that you like, a cup that you held in your hand, and all that just gone overnight. And as if it's normal to just pick up a bag of stuff, whatever you can find in the rubble, put it across your back and walk kilometers somewhere else to sleep in a tent, or if you're lucky. So we have to think in terms, it's not just about lost lives. It's not about just lost lives, people actually being killed and maimed and disappeared. It's also about losing things that connect us to each other, to humanity, to other human beings. Those are also important. We must not forget that. So like 80% of Gaza is basically uninhabitable at this point. So that's a big, huge number. Over 400,000 people have been killed. We have to really understand those numbers. It's not 60 some odd thousand. Those are just numbers that they have at the top. But there are many, many more people that have been killed. And the people that are starved, we can't just stay silent every single day. We can't say, I stopped crying for Gaza. I don't do that anymore. I used to. I used to not be able to talk about Gaza without crying. But I do cry sometimes for the world. What kind of world we're living in right now that allows what happens in Gaza to continue. So thank you for recharging my battery. And I hope we can recharge each other's battery today. It's not going to be all doom and gloom. It's going to be very joyful stories to be told as well. And I look forward to the conversation. Stick around afterwards, plenty of time. Thank you. I'm going to bring up Pam. Oh, by the way, the book is the #1 book on Middle East on Amazon. Number one.
You know, I did an interview yesterday morning with Breaking Points, and I reflected on the fact that there's sort of a dichotomy right now. On the one hand, you know, when I talk to the young people, and we are in numbers who are still in Gaza, they literally at the point where they're saying, look, we don't care what you do with us. We really don't. If you want us to go to Uganda, we go to Uganda. Just stop the killing. Stop the killing, and we want to have peace. And that breaks my heart because they're a very proud people. And, the book chronicles all these different wars. And their spirit was never broken, and yet this war has managed to bring them to the point where they're willing to give up their land. On the other hand, we also are at the point where, we have more people in Congress than I ever thought we would, calling for an end to Israeli arms. We have 40 boats, heading to break the siege. We have now, when I talk to people, I don't know about you, but I encounter most people who, they know what Palestine is. They're sympathetic. There's been a big sea change, but it's just tragic that it took that. It took that to get us here. So on the one hand, I'm working on the new epilogue right now for the paperback version of the book. And I was at first sort of at a loss what to say. Part of me wants to say, I don't believe in democracy anymore. I really don't. I've gone with Medea and her group, into Congress, and you see the Israeli flags outside the doors, and you hear stories from the staff saying that they've been told not to pick up the phone, just let them all go to voicemail. And it's hard to really believe that we have a democracy. The fact that where citizens' voices are heard at this level. On the other hand, seeing the power of the people, those 40 boats, et cetera, you have to hope. You have to still believe that something will come out of the ashes. And this is what it took. Yeah, we can help. I just want to reflect. One thing you'll see if you read the book, it opens with the story of how We Are Not Numbers got started. And it goes, it's at the end of the 2014 war, which we all thought was the worst. And there was a young man, I had been living in Gaza, and I had visited a home for a birthday party and met this young man who turns out to be the co-author of the book. And I kept following him on Facebook. And one day I saw that his profile photo had gone black. He was no longer posting, which is very unusual for him. So I reached out and I asked, are you okay? And his answer was fine. So anybody who knows me and knows I hate that guy, I don't like pat answers, so I said, no. This is obviously not the truth. Something is going on. What happened? And then he told me that his older brother, who he idolized, had been killed in the war. And so instead of avoiding the tragedy, which I think we all tend to do when we hear something bad has happened, we tend to maybe leave the subject. I suggested that he write a story. That's also what I'm known for. I'm always saying, that's a story, write a story about it. So I said, write a story about your brother. Let's celebrate him. And so he did. And over 3 months' time, we kept passing it back and forth, and I'd help him on his English. And I got to this point where I could tell he was holding out because as Kathy is here, she works with me on We Aren't Numbers. We're always telling them, there she is, to show, don't tell. So I kept trying to pull anecdotes out of him, specific stories. And I could tell he was holding back. And it's because his brother had been a fighter in the resistance. And he didn't want to tell me that because he figured, like most Americans, whatever, that I would assume he was a terrorist and I would all of a sudden lose interest in his story. And of course, that's not the case, because by that point in his story, I had gotten to know him as a human and heard about him as from a kid, and I had read about what had happened to him that had sort of changed him. And I realized this is a story we don't hear. We only hear about these nasty fighters who kidnap people or shoot rockets, and we don't hear about them as humans. And we don't ask the question, how did they get to the point where they felt like they had to do this? And that's when I realized, we have something here. Maybe we should keep repeating this process. Assign these young people mentors because they felt really isolated. They needed some international champions. They needed to improve their English. And let's bring some of these stories out that we are not hearing. And actually, I want to, and that's what became We Are Not Numbers. That's the model. We assign volunteer mentors to these young people, and they work on their stories. And it started off being a focus on remembering the people who died, but I quickly realized we had to expand it to everyday life, because that's actually, I think, one reason why October 7th happened. If we only pay attention to the violence, we're not looking at the structural violence, the lack of electricity, the lack of water, the lack of education, that sort of grinds people, it grinds your soul down. I just want to read a little portion of that very first story that I mentored Ahmed on. He hates it when I read the story because and it is true that if you look at his writing today, he has developed so much. It's very simple compared to his writing today, but I think that's the beauty of it. And I think that if you listen, you'll hear why people turn to resistance. Oh, okay, thank you. So he starts off by talking about the 2008-2009 war, which is actually when I went to Gaza the first time right after that war. And he says, he's talking about his older brother, Ayman. He says, during that war on Gaza, Ayman was still in high school. He saw his friends both die and grieve. More than 340 kids like him were killed. Ayman was an eyewitness to it all. Conditions were especially difficult for our family. We suffered a lot because my father was a taxi driver and he could not find fuel for his car. This blockade took us back hundreds of years. We even needed firewood to cook. But Ayman finally found a way to become active in standing up for his family and his people, working with an organization that allowed him to get aid for needy people and distribute it to our neighborhood. In times of misfortune, the neighbors came to Ayman. They thought he was our only hope. But in 2012, Israel again invaded our land for 8 seemingly endless days. When it was over, Ayman was not the same. He was restless, desperate to find a more effective way to protect his people and defend his homeland. So it's sort of like, remember that. You go through those experiences, you are not the same. It changes you. And in fact, he says, in July 2014, Israel launched its third war on Gaza. From the beginning, the Israeli army struck houses of civilians. It demolished many vital institutions, including hospitals, schools, and mosques. They tested all kinds of internationally prohibited weapons on us, and in the process exterminated entire families. Even dead people were not safe. Graveyards were bombed and bones were exposed. Gaza was sinking in the blood of families and children. Ayman's rage grew inside him. Again, note that. There's a consequence to this. Since no other type of resistance seemed to work, he joined an armed wing of Palestinians. On 19 July 2014, he was with 5 of his friends in a building ravaged by a previous war, when a missile weighing thousands of kilograms obliterated their gathering place, causing his soul to fly to its creator. Ayman was gone, and so were our dreams. When I close my eyes, I see his face. How can I forget him? He was always by my side, never leaving me, even when I was in trouble. He died and left my mother cracked in pieces. He died and left my father weeping all night long. Every day when I see Ayman's friends who are still alive, I feel a bitterness of loss I cannot bear. Now imagine that impact on him and what it's doing to an entire generation of people right now. And where do you think that rage and sorrow and frustration is going? Now, with Ahmed at the time, he was thinking about going into resistance himself. He felt like that he needed to do that to honor his brother, and like his brother, he felt a rage he didn't know what to do with, and nothing had seemed to work. They tried it, they tried everything. They did nonviolent resistance, and they went to the International Criminal Court, and that didn't work. I sometimes wonder, naively so, I really thought, I said to him, by joining me with me in this project, by telling these stories and getting them out, avoiding the traditional media and finding a platform, I thought that perhaps it could make a difference. Maybe we would like change public opinion enough that eventually then the politicians would change too. And I was talking to Hizami right before the event. Sometimes I wonder, is it? I mean, I literally, sometimes I feel like I broke my promise to them that this would make a difference. There was even one young woman who we wanted to conclude her story in the book, who's still in Gaza, and she refused to have it published because in her mind, she's given up. She felt like she's fed up with all of international solidarity because it rings hollow to her. And that broke my heart. But I do think that, cumulatively, we have to hope that we're headed somewhere more positive. I want to show you, we're going to do I was going to show a couple of videos to give you an example. Back when I was still in Gaza, some of the very early stories we used the writers to make videos of them acting out their stories, so you can sort of see them in that moment. Both of them were in 2015. I want to see these beautiful people performing and show these first two videos. Yeah.
I am a girl who has no dreams and maybe no future. In a blink of an eye, I could be without hands, heart, and soul. Shall I also tell you about a beautiful park turned into sky by an man? Shall I tell you I would love to fly on a plane, but I'm so scared of being killed by one? Shall I tell you that I'm scared to look at the sky and count the stars, because maybe they will suddenly turn into the eyes that kill?
I want the world to know that Palestine has writers, artists, thinkers, and most importantly, lovers. I want the world to know that we're humans just like you. I want
Mainly because all those beautiful areas that I spent time in are gone. Are gone, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. And Anas is in Kuwait right now. He's a teacher, but again, his family, his father was killed in this latest war, and his brother is seriously injured, and he's been really desperately trying to get him out and has not been able to. Um, Now, I don't know if you heard me, that was Ahmed, that other young man you saw in the video. That's Ahmed. This final video I'm going to show is Greta Berlin, who couldn't be here tonight because she is working with the Samud flotilla. She's in the ground crew. But she was one of our very first mentors who signed on. And she made this video since she couldn't be here tonight, talking about one of the young men that she mentored and the story.
Hi, my name is Greta Berlin, and I was the co-founder of the book. Pam and I have known each other for a long time, and when she started this project called We Are Not Numbers, she said to me, "Would you like to be a mentor?" And of course, I was thrilled. I've been an English teacher all my life, and to mentor a young Palestinian in Gaza would be just wonderful. So I was probably one of the very first people that signed up to mentor. And a young man by the name of Alam was probably one of the first people who asked for a mentor and to help him write English. And I'd like to read just a small excerpt of what he wrote. He was one of the very first people, and this was written in 2015. It's called A Chance Encounter with My Teacher and the Tree. He had the same smile. I wanted to hug him and tell him that I missed him, and I missed his classes, and I missed his wisdom that he taught us. "Do you know me?" I asked. He looked at me a minute, looked at me, and he said, "You're that little kid that used to torture me and answering every question that I asked." He smiled. It took me back many years. I remember that he lived in Baytoun, and this was his home. Over there in the corner is a tree that he had planted, but now the tree is barren. It doesn't live any longer. I didn't know what to say to him. War had killed his life and killed the home. He pinched my ear the way he used to do it when I was a child. And he said, "What happened to you, Alam? How have you become the man that you are standing now in front of me?" "Well, I enrolled in university. I studied for a bachelor's in Arabic language, and I pursued my English degree. I received a technical diploma in translating, and here I am." My eyes were having a hard time looking at him. I said, "What about your son, Rafe? How is he? I knew him when we were young." My teacher wept. He said, he was killed at the very, very first of this particular war when a bomb dropped on us. His blood was everywhere, and he left us. I didn't know what to say. He said, "Well, but I have a surprise for you. I avenged my son's murder." "How did you do that, teacher?" "They stole my son from me, but my wife was pregnant." I smiled, knowing that that was a good answer. It had been a long time since I attended his classes, yet he had at least a lot left to teach me. And he said, "Don't give up, Mom. Be patient and stay beside another day." Alon did stay beside another day. By starting his own business, a translation service, he was doing very, very well until this last massacre. They're still in Gaza. I no longer ask them what they're doing. I ask them if they are safe. He married one of the translators. And he has a young daughter who's 6 years old. Please get this book. Because there are people who are just like us. They want to life just like us. You'll read these stories. They'll make you laugh and they'll make you cry. But they'll make you see the Palestinians as the young men and women who want the same thing that we do.
The reason why I went to Gaza the first time, my activism started in 2007 when I went with Global Exchange with Shelley, who was right in the audience, yeah, to a tour of the West Bank. And I returned the following year as a volunteer with the International Solidarity Movement, and this time stayed a month. And really, I mean, the power of citizen trips to Palestine is that I don't know of anybody who can go there and not come back obsessed with it, literally. If you've read The Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates, who, by the way, endorsed the book on the cover, you can tell from his trip to Palestine the same thing happened with him. It gets a hold of you and it will not let go. So I knew I was going to be coming back, and then Medea and Anne and Tig, yeah, they were invited to by the UN to bring a women's delegation. This is in 2009, right after that big war, to Gaza, and I signed on. I still remember we didn't think we'd get in, but we did, and it was life-changing, obviously, because then it was in my blood. I want to invite Medea up to talk about, that the power of citizen activism and what's really happened over the last 10 years and what activism looks like.
Well, first, let me give a shout out to Palestinian Americans who have always been on the forefront of this issue. But for many of us who are not Palestinian Americans, we have to learn about this. And learning about it, what better way, as Pam said, than to go there? And in 2008, in December, when Operation Cast Lead started, Tig and I and a small group of people were outside every day of the Hay Adams Hotel where Obama was staying before he was going to be in the White House. And as the bombs were falling and hundreds of people were being killed, we were out there saying, say something about Gaza, say something about Gaza. And the only thing he said is there's only one president at a time, that he was not going to talk about it. And we were so devastated by that. And we said, well, we're going to go. And we started trips. And we took one trip. And then more people wanted to go. And we took another trip. And then more people wanted to go. We took another trip. Tig, how many people do you think we took over the years? About 800, over 800 people went with us. And as Pam said, you go and you can't get it out of your system. You go and it feels, on the one hand, so devastating what people are living through, not just the bombing, but being caged in by Israel. On the other hand, you meet lovely, wonderful, warm, beautiful people that you become instant friends with. And that lives on within you. And so we would come back, and most of our activism was really about AIPAC. We would organize for protesting AIPAC at their big conference every year. And for those of you who remember, they were enormous conferences. They would get 6,000, 7,000 people at their conferences, paying a lot of money to come to Washington, D.C. And the most amazing thing about those conferences is they had like a ticker tape outside the convention center, highlighting who in Congress was going to be speaking there. And every member of the Senate and the House wanted their name to be up in lights to make sure that everybody knew they were going to be speaking at the AIPAC conference. That was the power of AIPAC. And we protested year after year after year. We'd get beat up at the conferences protesting. We'd get inside and get up on the table when Netanyahu was speaking and get pulled down, hauled out, one of our people to the hospital. But we kept protesting year after year after year. And yes, we did some things in Congress, but they were occasional. Well, then October 7th happened. And then we felt like we had to be in Congress every day. And I want to thank the people here who have been with us in the halls of Congress. Some of them in the back there come in every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And it has been tremendously heartbreaking on the one hand, when you wake up to Al Jazeera and you see what happened the night before, and then you go into the halls of Congress and you talk to people who are either stone-faced in their offices and don't give a damn, or they're actually telling you, Hamas, 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 October 7th, October 7th. And this is the answer to that October 7th, October 7th, October 7th, is this book. Because it tells most of the stories. What portion of them, Pam, were before October 7th? Like 80%? Almost all of them are before October 7th. And all of them are recounting the difficulties of life in Gaza before October 7th. And I want to echo what Greta Berlin said, which is buy this book and read it all the way through and give it to someone else. Because the stories are beautifully written. The stories tell so much about daily life in Gaza. And I also want to thank the mentors. I know we have a few here. Raise your hand if you're a mentor. So we've got Carol, who lives in the back, and people all over the country and probably beyond the United States who have been mentors. So it is a really beautiful, beautiful collection that we have to make, we have to put on the bestseller list, not just in the UK, but here in the US. So Pam had asked me to just have quick reflections on how the activism has changed. Well, one of the things that has happened is that AIPAC is losing its grip. And let's recognize that. AIPAC conferences are now down to about 1,000 people. Congress people don't want to go and speak at AIPAC. The people in AIPAC, when they're lobbying, they try to hide their badges so you don't know they are with AIPAC. And just this week, I found it astounding that there are 3 moderate centrist members of the House, 2 of them are from North Carolina, 1 of them from Kentucky, who have said they will not take AIPAC money. Before that, it had only been very progressive people in the House. So that is changing. And in case you missed an interview that Trump gave to the Daily Caller on Monday, I want to read you just a section about it. This is Trump. If you go back 20 years, Israel had the strongest lobby in Congress of any company, any corporation, any state that I've ever seen. Today, it doesn't have that strong a lobby. It's amazing. There was a time when you couldn't speak badly about Israel if you wanted to be a politician. But today you have AOC plus 3, and you have all these lunatics, and they've really changed it. Unfortunately, it doesn't give the credit to the real ones in Congress like Rashida Tlaib. And then the interviewer says, well, there was a Pew poll recently that found that 53% of surveyed U.S. adults had an unfavorable view of Israel. Among young Republicans, 50%, an unfavorable view. That's up from 35% last year. There's a growing group within MAGA, America First Coalition, Republicans, especially younger Republicans, who are skeptical of our support for Israel. Are you aware of this group? Are you worried about it? And Trump says, Israel is going to have to get that war over with. It is hurting Israel. There is no question about it. They may be winning the war, but they're not winning the world of public relations. That's Donald Trump. Of course, what we have to do is stop our government from continuing to support Israel and to stop, particularly in Congress, the weapons that we continue to send. And before I read this excerpt, I just want to make another pitch for anybody to join us in Congress. We're now there every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Raise your hand, the people who go virtually all the time with us. Raise your hand, bunch you. So you can come and talk to those people about what it's like. You can get on our WhatsApp group, but it is changing, and we need your help to keep it changing. So I want to end by reading an excerpt. Well, it's a short poem, and this is a poem that was mentored by Pam Bailey, and it was written by Basman Derwawi, and it's called A Degree in Surviving Assaults. And one of the reasons I want to read this poem is because it was written way before October 7th. It was written in 2021. He says, if there were a degree bestowed for surviving armed assaults, I would have earned it with honors, magna cum laude. I am living through my fourth now, although I'm not sure if I will live for graduation. If you test me, I bet I'd ace the exam. I can tell the difference between the voice of an F-16, F-35, Apache helicopter. I can immediately detect whether a sound is the shelling of tanks or the bombing from airplanes. But with my degree has come different types of syndromes: phobia of the night, hypersensitivity to the sound of moving chairs, or really any banging objects, insomnia from anticipating death. I have also learned a few truths. First, the world is hypocritical, yet it is full of hidden gems, good people willing to speak out. Second, actual death is when you don't stand up for what is right. Third, no matter what, Palestine will always be my home. Thank you.
I want to bring Hazami up next because, you know, there are 5 of the writers in the book who are in the U.S. right now on scholarship, and they're too afraid to talk. I mean, think about this. I mean, this should be the pinnacle of your young life. You're in a book, and they're too afraid to talk because of, you know, they have a U.S. visa as a student, and Trump just recently announced she's planning to suspend visas for Palestinian passport holders. So since they can't speak, I wanted to make sure that Hazami, who's one of the biggest supporters, she's the one leading so many charges out there, will maybe help speak for them. And Hazami, go up on the stage.
Feels weird up here. Hi, everybody. Happy to be in community with you all. So I was asked to talk about a little bit about kind of my activism experience and also read an excerpt. And I'm going to keep my experiences a little short because the story that I want to read is, I want to give it time. I want to give it the time that it deserves in light of where we are today, where there's a media blackout in Gaza, where the West Bank is being annihilated and people are being brutalized by barbaric Israeli squatters. Let's not call them settlers, they're squatters. I don't know why we continue to normalize through our own language what is actually happening. And while there are so many amazing movements happening around the world to shed light on Gaza, we have to be mindful of when the media becomes about our movements and not about Gaza. And I think that is important for us all to remember when we are talking about fleets of flotillas, which is unbelievably inspiring. But eyes should not be on the flotillas. Eyes should be on Gaza. The flotillas are a means to the end. The end is liberation of Palestine. The means needs to continuously highlight the end, which is liberation. And so I just want us to keep bringing ourselves back to Gaza, to continue to be grounded in the human experiences of Gaza, in the heartbreaking, heart-wrenching truths of what it is like to be human in Gaza. And I use the words to be human in Gaza very intentionally, because when you think about your own life and what it means for you to be human, what does that mean? Just take a moment and ask yourself that. What does it mean for me to be human, to be alive? People in Gaza don't have probably any of the things that you just thought about: safety, security, food, independence, freedom. The list goes on and on and on. And so when we talk about Gaza, and that's why I love the name of this book, We Are Not Numbers, we often even lump in people that we're advocating so passionately for into a collective, right? We're working towards liberation of Palestine. We are fighting for the people of Gaza. But do we take the time to actually connect with the human stories, the human experiences of these very people that are robbed of a chance to simply live and be human? Because living and being alive are two different things. What brought me to my advocacy was a realization that I was alive here as a shadow of who I want to be and who I wanted to be, which is a human rights advocate. And I'd worked my way up, in all the ways I knew how, to build enough credentials to one day be able to stick it to the man and say, this is whatever. The higher up you get in these institutions and in these systems, the more the control and the grip and the noose is tightened. You're a staffer. One day when I'm the executive director, I will have power. The executive director works under a board that oftentimes has more restrictive policies than when you're a staffer, because you could get away with stuff because people don't care who you are and people don't notice. And that is what I noticed through my journey and my advancements in my career. And so I did. In October 2023, looking at my beautiful little baby boy who fought for his life, I was actually just showing a dear friend a picture of him in the NICU. He was 2.5 pounds, this little tiny little thing. And he fought for his life, and I fought alongside him. And I just could not imagine what it would be like to have someone unplug his NICU bed. The rage I felt when they simply gave my son the wrong milk to unplug his bed was something I couldn't even begin to comprehend. And I will not even say that I can fully empathize with, because I do not know, and I will never know, and inshallah, no one will have to know, and that is why we fight. We can sympathize, but we need to be careful to not put ourselves in places where we feel we can truly empathize with an experience that none of us will have to ever, inshallah, endure. And that should give us strength to ensure that no one has to endure that. And that's what this book is. It's a collection of stories of endurance, of the inhumanity, of the unjust realities of the world in which we're living. But through it, you see the humanity, that you cannot rob a person of their integrity, of their love, of their heart, of their soul. You can bomb them into the ground, but they remain. And I want to read an excerpt from one of the stories called A Love Letter to Gaza from Nada Hamad. I'm going to skip a little ahead into the part that really resonated with me. When I think about it closely, I think I have a love-hate relationship with Gaza. I hate the fact that I am trapped here more than anything. I hate how even though Gaza has given me nothing but heartache and pain, destroyed homes, dead loved ones, homeless people, in every direction I look, I still see flowering bush plushing with color next to the ruins of someone's house, or remember a childhood adventure with my dad in one of his old bookshops. Then I fall in love with this place all over again. It's what Mahmoud Darwish, the most famous Palestinian poet, expressed when he said, "We have on this land that which makes life worth living." I love the sense of togetherness in Gaza. Despite the hardships, people still care about each other. During the last war, which Israel dubbed Operation Protective Edge, more than 96,000 homes were destroyed either fully or partially. And more than 500,000 Gazans were left with no shelter over their heads. During these hard times, some people cleared their basements or their roofs for others to use. When relatives' homes were damaged, many people took them into their own homes and split the space, food, clothes, and everything they had. I love how we managed to find a way to cope with every obstacle. Despite the seeming impossibility. A few years ago, when I was still in high school, we visited my aunt's house when the electricity shortage was in its peak. The fuel supply was low, that we went without electricity for 16 hours of the day, if not more. When it got dark and there was no light, my Uncle Jamal hooked up a few low voltage light bulbs to his car battery and we lit up the house and everyone cheered. I love how everyone in Gaza is a sea person, except our mothers, probably because they don't like rinsing sand out of our clothes. Sometimes during the hot summer days, it seems as if the entire city is actually at the beach. One time, my dad had promised us a trip to the sea. It was July, the hottest summer month, and all of us needed to cool off. It took us maybe 2 hours of groveling and promising to behave to get the little sand as possible on our bodies and our clothes before my mom agreed to come with us. When we got there, the beach was packed with people. You'd think only kids and their obligated parents were there, but that wasn't the case. It seemed as if all of Gaza City was there. Old people sitting under umbrellas, young men playing water football or volleyball, kids building sandcastles, or at least attempting to, older youth burying each other in the sand after spending ages digging holes in which to do it. We swam, we ate watermelons, and we laughed. I love our bumpy roads and how I might be walking leisurely 1 minute and then bumping into a hole in the next. I love the uneven streets because many of my memories that I've made with my friends were on these roads. We walk them on our way to eat ice cream, arguing about everything from the flavor that we wanted to try this time to whose grandmother's future baby had the best sense of fashion. Hint, I have a better sense of fashion. I love the fact that you can stargaze to your heart's content because most areas don't have much electricity most of the time. I love Gaza for its people, especially my family and friends. I love it for the way I'm accepted for my brain. Nerds and bookworms are celebrated here, unlike in many other societies. My time in high school, for example, wasn't a popularity contest. I went to an all-girls school. All of us wore the same uniforms, although there were slight differences in the girls' sneakers and backpacks. What mattered wasn't the outside appearances, and boy, did I look like a potato back in the day. Instead, we competed for who read the most books and who can figure out the math problems or answers to the physics questions. It was an academic contest, not a fashion one. I must admit, it did get stressful sometimes to always have to be better and do more. However, it was rewarding. I loved being among the best students in the class. It was a satisfaction like nothing else. I love the good, the bad, the heartbreaking, and everything in between, because I don't think I would be the person I am today if I hadn't lived in Gaza. In one of his many love letters to Melina, Kafka writes, quote, "Now I'm even losing my name. It was getting shorter and shorter all the time, and now it is yours. I am no Franz Kafka, and Gaza is no Melina, but I still love Gaza enough to send a letter to her with a declaration of my belonging." And I just want to encourage us all to carry these stories with us, to carry these stories with us in our advocacy and in our journeys, because we are not numbers is not a slogan and should not be a slogan. We are fighting for human beings with human lives that deserve to be human. Thank you.
Well, some of you know that I went on, now Ahmed leads We Are Not Numbers independently. It's a wonderful thing to start a nonprofit and then see it be able to be independent and thrive without you. I call that success. I started co-founded another nonprofit called More Than Our Crimes. And actually the name could have been We Are Not Numbers. Because it advocates for people in federal prison who also feel like numbers, who are mostly Black, people of color, and feel very invisible. And there's actually an amazing variety of commonalities between the two. I think intersectionality is really important. We cannot fight oppression unless people who suffer different kinds of oppression join together. So I want to bring up somebody next to speak named Assad Martinez. He is a member of the More Than Our Crimes network. I first got to know him when he was in prison. And he was actually in prison with Shukri Baker. Does anybody know who Shukri Baker is? He was one of the Holy Land Five, who was sent to prison right after 9/11 for supposedly funneling money to terrorists. And he's still there today. Even though there's been an Al Jazeera special and Miko Pellet wrote a book about him, he's still there today. And Assad was in prison with him. I'm going to let him tell that story.
Thank you. This is quite an event. I first want to give thanks to the true fighters who, was it Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, marched down to Capitol Hill, lend our voices to meaningful arguments being made in the name of humanity. That is a tremendous feat, and I honor you today. I'm thankful to you, and I'll be sure to pass this on to Shakri. First, I have to say that I want to give you guys like the background on how I met Shukri, who I call Abu. So in 2004, I was wrongfully charged, indicted, and convicted of first-degree murder, what later came out to be false accusations, paid informants, corrupt police officers, and a prosecutor who knew everything about it but refused to do anything about it. I spent 20 years of my life fighting to return back to my family, to return back to these beautiful faces that I see here today. We sometimes ask ourselves, why do we go through the things we go through? Just last week in Houston, or 2 weeks ago in Houston, there was an event there also honoring Shukri. And like I said at that event, that if life is about experiences, the experience that I went through for the last 20 years was a blessing to me because I met a wonderful man. He has completely changed my life. He has opened my eyes to so many wonderful things. And I'm honored to stand here supporting Pam in his name, in the name of all those who have fallen in Gaza. So I met Shukri in Beaumont, Texas, and I kind of want to give you the background. I met Shukri in Beaumont, Texas, who at the time that I met him, I was coming out of the law library frustrated because one thing that anybody that knows that fights law that doesn't have a law degree is that most of it just sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo, a bunch of double talk, and it really goes nowhere on purpose, intentionally. So I left frustrated, and I met Shukri in the yard, who at the time was reciting Quran. I knew nothing about the Holy Land Foundation that was based out of Richardson, Texas, right outside of Dallas, Texas. But it was his dedication to, even in the midst of turmoil, even at that moment, I knew that he was a fish out of water. He didn't come from the same places we came from. He had no background in the street knowledge. He had not even an ounce of criminality in his bone. Yet there he was, reciting Quran, reciting words that many have recited throughout the ages to give them guidance and hope, to help them heal from whatever wound they may be suffering from. And I sat next to him and just listened. That moment opened up my heart to all the agony that he was feeling. So Shukri was wrongfully charged, wrongfully indicted, and wrongfully convicted of supporting terrorism by setting up a nonprofit organization called the Holy Land Foundation that was in actuality supporting orphan children that had no home to go to, had no one to take care of them, supporting hospitals, supporting the elderly. This is what our government has decided to target a hero amongst us, to label him a terrorist, to take him out of his element, to bring him down to his knees in front of his family, and to parade him on a world stage to see that America would not allow its citizens to aid and assist innocent children. That is what our government not attempted to do, but has done and will continue to do until we say enough. It was in those 8 years that I walked with Shukri that I learned so much about not only the Palestinian struggle, but just about the love for humanity. I never heard him raise his voice. I never heard him use profanity. I've never heard him say anything that would even amount or equate to terrorist behavior or feelings or intentional wanting to do harm to anyone for practicing their religion. In fact, on one Friday during the khutbah, he stated that he loved his Jewish brothers and sisters. That sealed the deal for me that this man did not belong in prison. This is not about, and let me be clear, this is not about whether or not Jews have the right to exist. Of course they do. They're human. Of course they have the right to be loved and be protected. What doesn't have the right to exist is Israel's policy if it continues to strip us of our humanity, oppress us, murder us. We're talking about not only children, we're talking about not only mothers and fathers, we're talking about now people just writing stories about it. This is what Israeli policy has equated to. Something far beyond what our republic has been built on. It's never been about whether or not Jews have the right to exist. Of course they do. They're human. They have the right to be loved. They have the right to be protected. They have the right to have a roof over their heads, but they don't have the right to rally behind policies that kill and murder the innocent. So Shukri Abu Bakr and his 4 co-defendants, because it was 5 in total, and just so that I'm clear, 3 have been released. Those who were sentenced to 15 years, one was sentenced, Abdul Rahman was sentenced, I believe, to 10 years, and then 2 other were sentenced to 15 years, they're out. But the main 2, who are now in their 60s and 70s, with a 65-year sentence, have virtually been sentenced to death because they can't get it right on Capitol Hill, because they sell out to AIPACs, because they sell out to policies that don't reflect our republic, don't reflect our ideals. So I wanted to kind of give you a background on how I was introduced to the Palestinian struggle. And I implore, please, after, tell me who do I talk to so that we can go to Capitol Hill and continue to say his name. Because these men in their 60s and 70s should not be rotting in a federal prison just because. Just because we're afraid to not get voted back into office, just because we're afraid to lose contracts, just because we're afraid to lose business, just because we're afraid to lose status, just because we're enough. So, when I was going through the book, something that stuck out to me, first of all, as I'm reading, and I told Pam this, that this book reminds me of the book that Anne Frank left behind in that attic. The irony. This book reminds me of that same book she left in the attic when she was hiding from who? The Gestapo. A beautiful young Jewish child writing her last moments. This is what this book, this is the same thing. This is the same thing. There is no difference in what Anne left and what these beautiful souls have written in this book. And so I implore everyone to not only get a copy, but get a copy for a friend. Because we need to understand more than what we're being told. We need to understand the souls of these people. We need to feel the pain of these people. How do we get to this point? How did we get to this point? The same way I have comrades back there who were locked up as juveniles, came home as adults. And I just scratch my head and I keep saying, well, how the hell did this place get like this? Where's the humanity in people now that all we do is just rally and just pick it? No, enough of that. Let's start holding all these people accountable as aiders and abettors, as conspirators, because that's what this is. This is an assault, not on just one demographic of our gigantic globe. This is an assault on humanity. Not only are you just pounding these people, but now you're just spinning us and lying to us in the name of our hard-working dollars. No, it's enough of that shit. So I kind of like wanted to read what I kind of like was more, it jumped out to me, which is prison is personal for Palestinians. And it just reminded me of Shukri, and it brought all this to a full circle. So I'll just kind of like bounce around, but kind of like give you the words. And I also want you to envision that not only does Shukri go through this in the federal prisons, this is what we all go through in federal prison. The people in Gaza are us. We're just not being bombarded. We're being bombarded in other ways. Not with physical bombs, but with bombs that continuously strip us away from our constitutional rights. So prison is personal for Palestinians. At night, when the power cuts off in my house in Gaza, my family and I sit in the living room with candles or gas lamps. Same thing in prison. They cut the lights off and that's it. We gather without internet, television, or books. Same thing in federal prisons. We talk to pass the time until we go to bed. While it's annoying that we don't have the electricity, I like these moments when my mother and father tell us stories from the past. Then I'll skip. My maternal uncle also lived this miserable life for 24 years. He was accused of leading anti-Israeli activities and sentenced to 7 life terms. He was accused of leading anti-Israeli activities and sentenced to 7 life terms and 20 years. When I say free, I want you to say shukri, all right? Free? 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 Thank you. Along with more than 750 other people during the first Intifada. Although he was jailed just 6 months after his wedding, his wife never asked him for a divorce. That's what I call devotion. She decided to wait for him because she believed the resistance would eventually end the occupation. Bless her heart. Every month, my grandmother, my aunts, and my mother would begin preparing in the early mornings on the day they planned to visit my uncle, although only 2 were allowed to see him each time. They would wake before dawn, cook foods he couldn't get in prison, then start their journey from Gaza to Nafar prison near the Beersheba in Israel. My mother recalls this journey as long and demeaning. Same thing here in federal prison. The group spent the whole day traveling to see my uncle for only half an hour. Some days they came back to Gaza without having seen him because he was in the prison, hospital, or solitary confinement. We know about that. Where your family travels from here to California and are told they can't see you. We know a lot about that. Some days they came back to Gaza without having, As they passed through many checkpoints, the Israeli soldiers used dogs to search them, which was frightening and humiliating. On some days, they spent many hours waiting in a very hot or cold weather. My grandmother was illiterate, but she always waited impatiently for mail from my uncle, delivered by his lawyer, who would read the letters to her. These letters were like a treasure to her. She never let us touch them. I'm sorry, because I don't have my reading glasses, so just bear with me. Okay. So these letters were like treasures to her. She never let us touch them when we were children, but I always was curious about my uncle, so I searched for the letters and read them. And so I'll fast forward. In June 2006, after Hamas captured Israeli soldiers Gilad Shalit, the Israeli government barred Palestinians from Gaza from visiting their relatives in prison. Same thing that happens here. After that, my family didn't see my uncle. My grandmother and my grandfather died the next year, never seeing their son again. When I left here in 2004, I never saw my mom again. She promised that she would come see me, but death took her before that happened. During this period, on every Saturday at 6 p.m., my mother sat by the phone and waited for it to ring. Although my uncle was not allowed to call from prison, he would try his best to phone in secret. All of us sat around her in silence. This is the same thing that we do. So let's fast forward. Okay. In October 2011, I was a university student, no longer the child who searched secretly for her uncle's letters. On Saturday evenings, we gathered as usual, in the near dark. The phone rang. My father answered, and someone said many prisoners would be freed soon, my uncle among them. On October 8th, he was released as part of the prisoner swap for Gilad Shalit. Now it's 2016, and my uncle sometimes joins us for our shadowy evenings. He is not the same person after all those years of prison. And so let me say this real quick. Prison has a very negative effect on our psyche. We are coming back traumatized. We are coming back feeling ostracized. We are coming back not even able to relate. However, my uncle is free, and he and his wife had their first son recently. Although he was liberated, there still are more than 7,000 Palestinians held hostage. Hostage to me means that they haven't been legally charged with no crime they've committed. In Israel's prison, many for the absurd sentences for small acts, some who have never even stood trial. No one knows when they will be free. Again, when I read this, I feel so compelled to just share how much the Department of Justice have let us down as an institution. How could we stand aside and not ever mention the Holy Land Foundation? The Holy Land Foundation was probably one of the first nonprofit organizations that was on the scene after the Oklahoma bombing. They gave money when Oklahoma was bombed by true terrorists. They came to the aid. That is who Shukri is. And I really implore you to just Google, because everything is Google now. Google didn't exist when I left, but everything is Google. Google this, Google that. If I say, hey, how do I get here? They say, oh, just Google it. So just Google the Holy Land Foundation. Google it. Get involved. Understand that we are not numbers. We will never be numbers. I don't see numbers out here. I don't even see gentrification. I don't understand it. I see souls. I see beautiful faces. I see so many stories behind every face. And I'm passionate just to be in the same room, because we all are just one. There is no division. That is a lie that's been told to us countless of centuries ago. We have to chew that up and spit it out. That's a lie. So enough.
For our final speaker, I mentioned to you that I transitioned to be able to work on some other things. And, for the first like 5 years, I think, of the project, I was doing everything myself. It was crazy. And it was wonderful. We had a whole team of mentors, but there was so much work that had to go on behind the scenes. So one of the people who stepped in and took over a huge chunk of what I was doing, which we call like super editor, is Catherine Baker. Come on up. And she's now very integral. You'll see that we acknowledge her in the acknowledgments of the book. Very integral to the We Are Not Numbers team, and was also a wonderful mentor. So, Catherine.
So, thanks everybody for actually being here today. This is pretty exciting for We Are Not Numbers. And I do want to say before I make my remarks, I just want to give a thanks to you, Pam, for what I call your genius project. And I want to also thank a couple people who aren't here tonight, and that would be Ahmed, who's in the UK, and Wala, who's our project manager. She's also in the UK, and Mahmoud, who reviews all our pitches and helps us manage the inflow. He's also in the UK. And then we have Casper, who after October 7th, when the website was like going down in flames and we didn't have the passwords, he sort of rescued us and helped us transfer to another platform. And he's still our website support. And I'm and then we have Rahaf, who's in Canada, and she does our social media. So it's this like international team now. And also Alice, who's our mentor liaison, she's our coordinator, and she pairs the mentors who are all over the world with the writers. And I am a writer, so I wrote my remarks, but they're very short, so bear with me. I was asked to make some brief remarks on how I've been affected by my involvement with Juan. And I speak not just for myself, I think, but for all the mentors when I say that the opportunity to connect one-on-one with our writers is extremely fulfilling. It's a gift to be connected with their energy. Some of our writers are hilarious, and some are super intense about their emerging writing careers. They are all awe-inspiring. Most have, I'm talking now at this moment about post-October 7th. Most of them have significant roles obtaining food, water, and shelter for their families. Many study online despite the destruction of their universities. Some who have lost jobs because of the aggressions have developed entrepreneurial activities, such as one guy set up a little printer in a street stall. And some have been engaged in community efforts, such as providing solar power, working in food kitchens, or teaching in educational tents. And they all have big dreams they're trying to hold fast to, and they're in deep mourning, and yet they're going on. I've also been inspired by the mentors who support our writers in a variety of extra ways. Many have hosted writers who are now outside Gaza in their homes. They have established GoFundMe campaigns and held fundraisers. They have helped writers place pieces in literary magazines and news outlets. One mentor illustrated a chapbook for her writer's poetry collection, and another one helped arrange for her writer's essay to be read by people across the state of Vermont. Several mentors banded together with others in an amazing project that has helped evacuate out of the war zone scores of WAN writers and other scholars, believe it or not. But lately I've been having a discussion with mentors about the utility of what we do at the website. Pam kind of referred to this. We help writers in Gaza share their stories with the world, but to what end? We have not stopped Israel's aggression. We have not ended the occupation. I'm keenly aware these days that when I'm texting a writer to query a fact or ask about rearranging a paragraph, that she might be sitting in a tent with bombs falling in the background. So sometimes I ask myself, am I just moving commas around in a genocide? Is the work I'm doing for Juan taking me away from more effective uses of my time when I could be like calling President Trump to ask for a ceasefire or banging pots outside the Israeli embassy? In fact, I've done both, and the pot banging is very, got a lot of my steam out. But every time this question pokes at me, though, I do get an answer. Sometimes it's in the form of a thank you from one of our writers, and I'm going to quote one of them. How beautiful it is, she wrote, to start the morning by achieving one of your dreams, to become a writer and publish your first article on a global platform, an article that bears your name and reflects your identity, your story, and who you are. Alice, our mentor coordinator, put it to me this way. When we are texting with a hungry writer in a tent, we are also saying, we see you as a creative person who is more than a victim, that we care not only about your survival, but also your dignity, self-respect, and pride in creating a piece of writing. And this convinces me, connecting human to human with our writers is essential work. So the short answer to the question of how I have been affected by We Are Not Numbers is this. I'm honored to be entrusted with this work. So now I'm going to read from the essay, Book Lover's Simple Dream. I'm going to read just a few paragraphs from it. It's by Khaled Al-Alstath. In the first part of this essay, which I mentored back in 2015, he talks about the difficulties of obtaining books in Gaza, where there were in 2015, very few bookstores or libraries, and the universities were not well stocked. So he mostly read books in PDF form on his phone. So I'm going to pick up there. He says, reading makes me feel alive. The more I read, the more I fall in love with the characters. It's like I'm making new friends. When I read, I feel as though I can overcome my problems, frustrations, and tendency to overthink my life. In fact, in the summer of 2014, during that miserable time of shelling, bombardment, and death, I read day and night. It was a way for me to cope. I read on my small phone. It really hurt my eyes. I vividly remember a nightmarish evening when I was reading a book called Peace by science fiction writer Gene Wolfe. It's the story of a man growing up in a small Midwestern town in the early to mid 20th century, narrated by a character named Alden Dennis Weir. I was deeply engrossed in reading when suddenly a building nearby was hit by a ferocious rocket. The ground shook underneath my feet. I thought to myself, I wish this Alden fellow would come and see how the hell we live here. Although my desire to read is often thwarted, my passion, I feed my passion in many ways. For example, I post quotes from books I've read on Facebook. I constantly search the internet for novels by new authors. I lead book discussions at my university. I look on YouTube for videos of authors reading their work. And I search for photographs of the great libraries of the world, such as the ones in London, Washington, D.C., and Alexandria, Egypt. I ask myself, will I be lucky enough to visit those places one day? Or because I am Gazan, will I be forever denied the pleasure of going overseas and experiencing the reality of these places? I yearn to have a decent library in Gaza and for a good environment in which to read. Is this too much to ask? Thank you.
Well, as I mentioned, Ahmed and I are working on the epilogue for the paperback edition now, and we're both sort of at a loss. I mean, you know, when we wrote the first epilogue, it's in the book. It was bad, but not like it was now, and so it's almost hard to say. People want you in the epilogue to sort of look forward. I mean, even for the future, we are not numbers. You know, when I went through all the stories, there were over 1,000 stories to select which ones would be in the book. you know. And then it was my job to also go back and find some of the early writers who, you know, had left us and find out where they are today, you know. And it's like, it was heart wrenching. You know, so many of them had left. They didn't want to leave. So many of them are still trapped. You know, Kathy and I both get messages every day from people, you know, who are hungry. People who have had, one young woman who had a C-section without anesthesia, if you could even try to imagine that. So we don't know what, you know, what will be the future? What will be the next book of We Are Not Numbers? Will they all be where? I don't know. I'm actually collaborating now with another young writer who's trying to think about a book called Exile, because I'm also hearing from some of the young people who have managed to get out on scholarship to other countries, but they are not happy. You hear, you know, they've achieved their dream, but it's like survivor's guilt. You know, they're out and they're free, but their family is not, and they can't leave that behind. And we're not going to have a lost generation just in Gaza. We're going to have a lot of young people around the world who are crippled mentally and emotionally. So, you know, I don't really know what to say about the future, but I can say that their culture and their pride, you know, will be intact. And they count on all of you. That's their hope. And I do believe that by continuing whatever way you find to work, whether it's visiting Congress, whether it's going to protests, whether it's like, you know, working with our writers, whatever way you find, whatever is right for you, keep doing it. And cumulatively will make a difference. So if any of you want to make, you know, have comments or questions of any of the speakers, it's great. Otherwise, all the books are also available.
I think we can take a few questions. If everyone can just keep your questions brief, under a minute would be great. But you can raise your hand and we'll get that started. Anyone want to start us off? If we don't have any questions, we can wrap it up, I think, and give it up one word. Oh, of course. Yes, I see someone in the back.
Hi, I was just curious to know if you've been receiving fewer